Does Juan Soto hate the Mets? Of course not, but big media wants you to believe that Juan Soto is miserable. They want you to believe that he doesn't like being a Met. They want you to believe that he's taking private jets. Anything that makes you believe that Juan Soto does not want to be a Met came out today in the news, and almost none of it was true, which is impressive because we have big publications and big news sources like ESPN, one of the writers for NJ.com, Bob Klapisch, just completely lying through his teeth. It's insane. Michael Kay, one of the biggest heads in all of baseball, not talking about his ego, I'm talking about like physical size of his head, just lying out his mouth all day on his radio show that nobody listens to. It's not the number one radio show in New York. I'm taking shots. You come for our boy Juan Soto. We're coming for you, especially when it's all unsubstantiated. It's not true. This stuff is crazy. Jeff Passan had to deny his own network's report on Sunday Night Baseball. That's how bad it's gotten today. So we're going to go through the timeline of what's been going on since Sunday. Can't believe there's this much to talk about. Can't believe that there's a timeline for Monday and news that isn't true about Juan Soto. But that's what we're going to talk about today and give you our thoughts and opinions on it. James, you want to get us started off? Where are we going first?
Yeah, I think the first place this all began was what was going on Sunday afternoon before Sunday Night Baseball, what happened briefly before Sunday Night Baseball, then during Sunday Night Baseball, because the report was heading into the day on Sunday that Juan Soto was going to be mic'd up with the Sunday Night Baseball crew in the middle of the game for an in-game interview. And then right before the game, there was a very nominal tweet that came out that was like, oh, it's going to be Brandon Nimmo instead of Juan Soto. People are like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then if you track back to the middle of the day, Buster Olney is kind of gloating on Twitter about he can't wait to have Juan Soto mic'd up because specifically he said, this is Buster Olney's tweet, on Sunday Night Baseball, we've got the Mets and Yankees, Juan Soto wearing the mic, and we'll ask him about Aaron Judge's season. Per Elias Sports, Judge reached base for the 100th time this season. This is still the real tweet. On Friday night, he did so in the team's 44th game of the season. That's the fewest games for a team player to reach 100 bases in the season. 2002, when Barry Bonds also made it to 100 times on base in the Giants' 44th game. The only other Yankees to reach base 100 times in the team's 44 games this season were Mickey Mantle in 1956, who won the Triple Crown that year, along with Babe Ruth in 1930 and 1923. Buster only tweeted that at 10:17 a.m. on Sunday morning, promoting Juan Soto being on the mic on Sunday Night Baseball, and then writing 400, 500 characters about great Yankees of all time and saying he couldn't wait to ask him about the Yankees. What the hell? And we chastised this a little bit in the episode yesterday, but even just to get more on it, what the fuck kind of reporting is this? Why is the only thing you're going to ask Juan Soto about is the Yankees, is Aaron Judge? Mickey Mantle? You're going to ask Juan Soto about Mickey Mantle? When Francisco Lindor came from the Indians to the Mets, you didn't ask him about Jose Ramirez in his first interview. He's not getting questions about Larry Doby and Bob Feller. Why on earth is the only thing ESPN wanted to talk to about Juan Soto was the Yankees? So then we never officially knew why that happened. So then we get into the game on Sunday Night Baseball, and Carl Ravitch just drops this insane quote that Juan Soto and his family take private jets on every Mets road trip, which I wasn't listening to the game. I know you were listening to the game. Hearing that back today, I was like, what?
Yeah, it was something that, one, I wasn't really paying attention too much because after a certain amount of time, the ESPN broadcast just starts to become droning on, and it's like they say nonsense. This is part of the reason why. It's not true. Jeff Passan had to come out later in the day and tweet and say the private jet thing is not real. Juan Soto travels with the team. There is no private jet. Along with the lines of, like, if they were giving him private jets, we've seen that this would have to go against the luxury tax threshold. Mets just can't give him private jets and count as nothing. Like, these things are in the CBA so that teams can't take advantage of these perks to use against the luxury tax threshold. And it's just not true. I can't believe that Carl Ravitch said it. But the biggest problem for me, one of the biggest things, because Carl Ravitch can say that, and people could have just knocked it off like I did. Nobody was talking about it last night.
No one.
The reason it blew up today is because Boomer and Gio went super viral on Twitter, super viral on their radio show. We've media marveled them a couple times now, which is shocking because they're both Mets fans. So I don't know why they're doing this. They talked about that, one, he was begging to not be on the microphone, and then two, they said, who knew he would get his own private jet to away games? None of it is true. Granted, Carl Ravitch put out bad info, so they're just reporting on the bad info they got, but you would think that somebody, somewhere along the lines, from WFAN, from ESPN, from anywhere, would do any sort of actual reporting, research, journalistic obligation to make sure you get the right story and not just spread blatant lies that aren't true.
You know, Juan Soto just had a brutal 3 days. He could smile all he wants. He could take his helmet off and acknowledge the boos all he wants on Friday night. at the end of the day, it was a bad weekend for him. So now he and his family can get on the private jet and go up to Boston. That was interesting that Carl Ravitch said that part of it yesterday. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. And I also heard Carl Ravitch talk about, Juan Soto vehemently trying to back out of being mic'd up, that he was begging to get the microphone off of him.
Remember when the Yankees were saying, we're not going to give Juan Soto a suite because we don't give our players suites? Who knew that Juan Soto was getting a private jet on top of all of this to away games? The point being is that if Juan Soto is putting up huge numbers and Juan Soto's coming through,
nobody cares.
Nobody really cares about that. But then all of a sudden, when that doesn't happen, and then somebody else is coming for a contract extension, and the Mets treat that guy like crap compared to what that guy thinks that Juan Soto has, that's where the schism
spot
happens, right?
Yeah,
so,
I know.
I almost fell off my chair last night when I heard Ravitch say that, because I knew that he got in a suite. I had no idea that he had gotten a private jet charter.
And then it took all the way up until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon for Jeff Passan to tweet, which is crazy that Jeff Passan, who's the absolute most trusted, most reliable, most worthwhile baseball journalist that's around right now, has to be the one that says, to clear up what others have asserted, Juan Soto does not fly separately from his Mets teammates on a private jet. He flies on the team plane. There is no private jet provision in his contract for him or his family. Ridiculous that for some reason he had to have said that, but also the problem is that Boomer and Gio show happens early in the morning. Jeff Passan tweets us 4 in the afternoon. There was about 6 hours intermittent there between that report going viral, getting 500,000 impressions on Twitter, for this thing to all spiral out of control. And then 2 other things happened in between this process. One, Michael Kay started to run his mouth. Michael Kay won his afternoon radio show, and as Michael Kay has done since the second Juan Soto decided he wanted to become a Met, was whining, was bitching, was complaining. Because again, that's all he's done.
He talks is on that radio show. He does games and he's silent for the Yankees. But now that he gets to talk about Juan Soto not being on the Yankees, he's like fucking erotic about it. He can't wait to talk about it.
And we media marveled Michael Kay back when this happened because he went into this whole diatribe when Jeff Passan was on his show. Because again, Michael Kay is also an ESPN employee, talking about how it's Juan Soto did this. He was obsessed about everything with the money. Obsessed. It was all about the money, the money, the money. That was all Michael Kay was about. And Jeff Passan had to be like, well, it's only $4 million AAV difference per year. That is money, but that's not a significant amount of money when you're considering the difference between 47 and 51. He was talking a lot about the treatment of the family, that story that went around during the winter. So then today, Michael Kay, full 180, he says, and I quote, "People in the know say that Juan Soto wanted to be a Yankee. He chose the Yankees, but his family wanted to be a Met, so he chose the Mets."
And I'll say it right now, and it will be denied. And of course, it has to be denied. But I've talked to people that I respect. He wanted to return to the Yankees. That was his preference. His family said, "You're going to the Mets." His family felt very comfortable around Alex and Steve Cohen, and they said, "You're going to the Mets." And he is a guy who listens to his family.
Which is the opposite of what Michael Kay was saying that people in the know were saying when the contract was signed a few months ago. So it's amazing how quickly a guy like Michael Kay can change his tone around something like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive. He used to be a legitimate journalist. Like, that was Michael Kay's big thing. And I don't know what he did because it was before our time, and I didn't read the newspaper when I was young. And I'm not Mike Francesa, who said they would throw away the comics and only read the sports articles in the newspaper. But, like, how can you just put out these things without any substantiated evidence? Him and your boy Bob Klapisch from NJ.com just being like, vibes, you got to trust me. I got a source. The source will never be named. I won't tell you if they're an employee. I won't tell you if it's a family member. I won't tell you anything. I'm just going to say, I got a guy. Trust me, guys. It's like when your friend in high school is like, I've got a girlfriend in Canada. You can never meet her, but you got to trust me. She's real.
Yes. And the issue is that, and this is going to be a funny thing now, we're going to get to this Bob Klapisch article. Both him and Kay mentioned they had a source, and both of them mentioned it as a team official. People in the know, like this kind of vague thing. Because Michael Kay also said that Soto's very glum around the clubhouse. All the time that Michael Kay is spending in the Mets clubhouse, of course.
He's there all the time.
He's able to know that. But then we have to get to the Bob Klapisch article on NJ.com. And first of all, with something like this, I'm very happy for NJ.com. Because today, NJ.com had their moment in the sun. I'm sure today, NJ.com and Bob Klapisch.
NJ Transit's back, so that's another big thing for NJ.com.
Double up. Huge day for New Jersey here, because I can't imagine how many clicks they got today relative to the rest of their existence as a newspaper the last couple of years. Bob Klapisch begins this article. Here's a quote directly from the article. "It was behind a paywall, got past the paywall." I have the whole article for you guys. I got quotes up and down this thing.
Kratz, I'm going to let everyone in on a little secret. I am not a fan of carrying around physical cash. I go Cash App, where you can send, receive, or transfer money with family and friends. It's super easy. They've got your back too. Like if you're trying to send some money and you maybe put in the wrong account name, they'll be like, hey, this is a sketchy account. Are you sure you want to send this? Cash App has your back. They do it safe, securely, easily, and fee-free.
And all you got to do is download the app, and Scott can actually pay for his half of dinner.
Exactly. For a limited time only, new Cash App users can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, there's no catch. Download Cash App, sign up. It's very easy, and use our exclusive referral code Territory in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App.
I don't claim to be an expert in human behavior. This is the first line. This is how he started this article. I don't claim to be an expert in human behavior, but sometimes all you need is a halfway decent radar to know when someone is unhappy. That's what I'm seeing and sensing in Mets right fielder Juan Soto after his lost weekend in the Bronx. The man is downright miserable. I understand if you were to watch Juan Soto only this weekend for the whole season, possibly besides last season if you're a Yankee fan, writer, for the only time in his career, and be like, wow, he looks like he's not having that good of a time. I didn't hear any of these quotes a couple weeks ago when Starling Marte hits a walk-off single and he's jumping around with him in the outfield. I didn't hear any of these quotes 2 weeks ago now where Juan Soto looks like he's just having the time of his life in the bullpen, Max Kranick and Ryan Stanek. None of these quotes were happening then. But because he had 3 consecutive bad games in the national spotlight,
one of them wasn't even that bad. He walked 3 times.
It's true. But just, again, the vibes of that series were bad. We talked about that a lot in the big series recap episode that came out yesterday. But it was the tone of this article that got so judgmental and so I'm an expert on the human condition so quickly from Klapisch, where he called him naive for tipping his hat on Friday, which was kind of objectively a funny move and something that was like good showmanship from Soto.
Yeah, no, I thought that was like a funny little I thought it was a funny tip of the cap back almost to the Yankees. Like, hey, you booed me. Here's my acknowledgement that you gave me the boo. Like, I'm tipping the cap, like, kind of being like, hey, you got me. You booed me. Like, you came out and you hate me. That's fine. The first line that you read, it sounds like how Nathan Fielder would start an episode. Like, that sounds like his opening dialogue would be like, I don't claim to be an expert in human behavior, but sometimes all you need is a halfway decent radar to know when someone's unhappy. And that's a satirical show. This was a legitimate article written by someone who claims to be a legitimate journalist. It's crazy.
Not just claim. Bob Klapisch has been around both the Mets and the Yankees for
I know
40-something years. He wrote a book. He's written tons of books, but he wrote the original book about the Mets, the worst team money could buy, about the 1992 season, with Saberhagen shooting the bleach out of the water gun at the reporters. Like that was a big fiasco. But Klapisch is a Yankee guy, but he has covered the Mets for a long time. So his longstanding connection with the Mets, all the way back to the 80s, does tell us that there probably is someone in the building that he has. But that's also telling us that since he hasn't worked with the Mets that closely for many years now, that source has to be someone who's very old. It might not be in the know as well. It might not be someone that's getting also the best information. But to go on more about what Klapisch was saying, because now he goes into about Juan Soto and the ESPN stuff that was been alluded to a lot, alluded to by Michael Kay, Boomer and Gio, Carl Ravitch, this and that. But then he said that Soto changed his mind minutes before the game. Soto told Mets officials, again we're hearing that line, Mets officials, he was tired of answering questions about Aaron Judge and sick of explaining why he chose the Mets. And then Klapisch decides to, first of all, of fucking course.
Yeah, that's fair. Like these, I don't know who was talking about it on Twitter. I wish I bookmarked it, so hand up bad on my part there. But someone was like, all these ESPN player interviews are always softballs. How are you doing? What's going on? This is not a softball.
And then Klapisch goes on, again, to just wrap himself in a pretzel in a second to undo whatever he's done in this article. Most players jump at the chance for the easy Q&A. They're designed to make you look good. The fact that Soto blew off the network was the first sign of his darkening state of mind.
Explain to me how him answering why he chose the Mets and what he thinks about Aaron Judge and stuff, how is he excited to talk about that? You're not even talking about him. You're like, hey, let's talk about the $700 million contract, not how does it feel to be the highest paid athlete in the history of the world. Let's talk about why you chose the Mets over the Yankees 2 months after the season has started now. And let's talk about your old teammate who you don't want to talk about anymore. You're on the Mets. He's here. Why would he want to be subject to those questions? it would have been super funny, like you said, shout out Meek Phil, if he just started answering in Spanish when they ask him those stupid questions.
Should I read the Buster Olney quote again? The 500 characters. On Sunday Night Baseball, we've got Mets and Yankees. Juan Soto wearing the mic. We're asking about Aaron Judge's season. Per Elias Sports, Judge has respaced for the 100th time this season. This and that and the other thing. How in the world are you promoting an interview? Why didn't they just interview Aaron Judge?
Yeah, why not be like, hey, Aaron, you're playing unbelievable. How does it feel? Why does anyone care what Juan Soto's opinion is on Aaron Judge's season right now? That doesn't matter.
Why can't you ask Juan Soto to be like, hey, you've gone viral for a few clips of you hanging out in the bullpen. What's going on in there? Yeah. Starling Marte has been a member of the team this year. He had a huge walk-off hit against the Phillies a few weeks ago.
What
was that moment like for you and him?
In the Subway Series on the other side? That could have been the easy question to kind of bait out that answer of Mets Yankees.
What's it been like being on this team this year for the first time with Clay Holmes, the guy you're teammates with last year, both crossing over the borough lines in the same season? Both of you guys having objectively fine seasons at this point in time. Juan Soto still having an objectively fine season. People are talking about how bad he's been. Do you guys remember Francisco Lindor in 2021? Do you guys remember his 500 OPS in June? Does anybody have any memory of this shit happening? I feel like every single time a baseball season ends, every single baseball fan goes into a hyperbaric chamber and comes out with amnesia, like no baseball season's ever existed before. But there's a multitude of questions that ESPN would have been really nice to ask Soto. That would have been much more pertinent, much more timely, and much more interesting than ask Juan Soto about Aaron Judge. It's like that's like I was like, hey, Mark,
why didn't they ask Brandon Nimmo about it?
Hey, Mark, do you want to come on my podcast, my baseball podcast, talk about your baseball career?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Also, can I ask you about your ex-girlfriend?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, let me get really personal.
It didn't make any sense they're going on. I think, again, Klapisch has to get all, Big J journalist, his darkening state of mind. Then Bob Klapisch goes on to say, it looks like Soto has put on a few pounds in the middle.
Doesn't look like it at all. He looks exactly the same.
What are you talking about? You, Bob Klapisch, are saying that Juan Soto is fat? And again, but now we're going to realize why Bob Klapisch went on this diatribe, why Bob Klapisch was so upset. This is a telling sign of the Big J journalist. And I understand it a little bit from their perspective because there's something that makes it much harder for them to do their jobs. But now he mentions the fact that Juan Soto left the stadium on Sunday night without talking to reporters. Again, he told the Mets team official that he was going to go outside, say hello to his family, and then come back and do his media availability. And he never came back. Again, the third time now between these two sources, we've heard the term Mets official. And if it's a Mets official that was talking about someone's media availability, again, like this isn't someone that's involved in the heavy baseball stuff. This is media stuff. That's who this person is, whatever. The speculation. But this is the whole reason. This is the crux of why Klapisch wrote any of these things. Because he's pissed off because he wanted to write an article talking to Juan Soto. Because I'm sure he had some conversations with him last year. You could ask him a few questions, get a few quotes, have a good article, quotes from Juan Soto. He doesn't do this. This drives him and all reporters up a wall. And then, here's the line. This is when it gets good. Just as Juan Soto turned his back on ESPN, he did the same to reporters who were waiting to speak with him post-game in the clubhouse. Soto got dressed and began walking towards the door. He told the Mets official he'd be back to answer questions after seeing family members outside. He never returned.
It's just like the sense of entitlement is insane. And this is part of the reason why we've started Media Marvels in the first place, was that one,
and this podcast.
And this podcast. One, there's insanely bad journalism going on at times where it's just like the stupidest articles, the dumbest quotes. I mean, we do it to Mets people. So this isn't just a Mets Yankee thing. We'll media marvel anybody. We've media marveled ourselves on this podcast
multiple times.
So we'll go after anybody that says something stupid. But the sense of entitlement that these guys have, I'll tell you this, like, I think from a vibes perspective, I definitely don't love the idea of Juan Soto just leaving. Like that, I think there is something a little bit weird there. But for them to be like so sour grapes because they couldn't get the quote that they were trying to set Juan Soto up for, because Mike Puma kind of opened the door with this a couple weeks ago when he got the Aaron Judge quote. It ties back to that a lot. Everyone's like, this fucking Mike Puma guy gets this quote. How the hell does he get it? That could have been mine. Everybody wants theirs now. And we know that Juan Soto will talk candidly if you can convince him that it's a baseball conversation.
Yes, and again, this probably ties back to Soto being like, okay, fool me once, shame on me. You fool me twice, you won't get fooled again. Because then now Klapisch has to tie this whole thing together. He's going to end this in the most dramatic, hyperbolic way you could possibly imagine.
Dramatic.
These are troubling signs for the Mets hierarchy. I'm told they're concerned about Soto's lack of enthusiasm for his new team. Again, who's telling him this? Who's telling him this? That's the other thing, because there's now a rat, allegedly. There's a rat. Somewhere in the line, there is a rat right now.
There's a Mets official who's a rat.
The only time Soto seemed happy this weekend was while he interacted with Judge, manager Aaron Boone. As I said, I'm no mind reader. Again, doubling down on the fact that he has no idea what he's talking about. But my hunch is that not only does Soto miss the Yankees, but the permanence of his decision is sinking in. Soto is staring at another 14 plus years in Flushing.
Now, just for some context about the permanence that is setting in for Juan Soto and the sinking feeling he has for his decision settling in. Just to keep in mind, the Mets are currently 29-19. The Yankees are 27-19. Both some of the best teams in Major League Baseball. Juan Soto is getting paid $750 million. $50 million a year. I don't think there is any sort of grief setting in of Juan Soto of, oh no, I made a mistake signing the biggest contract ever and living in the exact same city I was playing in last year. We're acting like Juan Soto moved to fucking Tuscaloosa, Alabama or something like that. He lives in New York. There's no change.
And the big part of this is what we alluded to in the episode last night, is that I fully agree that it was sour grapes of Juan Soto to leave the stadium and not talk to reporters.
Yes.
I don't really blame him for skipping the ESPN thing when Buster Olney was promoting
Absolutely
the fact
not.
that he was only going to talk to him about Aaron Judge. I'd be like, why, dude? What are you talking about? But then it does come back to what we were alluding to, that Juan Soto knows he's not playing up to his own standards. It's painfully obvious. I don't think anybody on earth is more aware of it than him, despite what every single Mets, Yankee fan, journalist on earth would want you to believe that they're the ones who are the most aware of it. No one cares right now more about Juan Soto's struggles than Juan Soto. The guy is competitive as fuck. He's one of the best players of all time, and there's a lot of pressure for him to live up to this massive contract, and he intends to live up to it. Nothing there has changed. It's been 7 weeks of baseball. People are like, I can't believe this is happening. Oh my God, he's so unhappy. Again, these are Mets fans that have not been cut from the same cloth.
No.
These are Mets fans that do not remember 2005 Carlos Beltran. They don't even remember first half 2022 Francisco Lindor. Remember that? Remember that? When we were a year and a half into this shit and people were still saying these things? These are people that do not remember Yoenis Cespedes and the Wild Boar. These people don't. Like, this is so much shit has happened with this team. For this to be this much of a story right now, it just shows that what the Mets being good does to these journalists and what it does to big media, and how much they have to struggle for their clicks when this team is actually good, competitive, and playing good baseball. I know that week and a half they've not been playing good baseball.
Bad baseball.
But objectively, on the season, it's good baseball, and baseball that continues to look like it will sustain being relatively good.
I just want to say, before Arena Club, if you were trying to very actively buy, sell, trade, it was very complicated and used a lot of mail that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to do it, but I'm glad we have Arena Club now because it's a one-stop shop for everything card related.
It is. And right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or your first card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/FOUL. Use code FOUL. If you're a collector, you've got to check out Arena Club. Go get after it.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between being like, hey, the Mets are playing poorly, Juan Soto's having bad at-bats, versus being like, Juan Soto stinks, this guy's done, he doesn't want to be here, the Mets have a problem, and Juan Soto hates being a Met. Like, those two things couldn't be more polar opposites, and yet somehow they're being misconstrued as the exact same thing.
Especially when people like Bob Klapisch are suddenly becoming like body language experts.
Yes.
And trying to be like, literally saying,
One thing I will say about these journalists are they're usually so sociable and really, really good at social interactions with other humans.
Amazing.
So they're always like just the most sociable people. You love the conversations you have with them. They're never looking down at their feet and talking. They're always pumped to be in front of the camera. So I'm sure, Bob Klapisch probably has years and years of experience of knowing exactly when people are happy or not based on body language.
Yes, wide ranging socializing, even though you spent the last 40 years around baseball every single day, working nights, working weekends, working summers, all that stuff. Very, very wide ranging socialized. But then it does get to the game on Monday night in Boston. And there's another moment in this game that, of course, has to become news because now it's going to happen every single day until something else changes here, where Juan Soto hits a ball high off the green monster in Boston, Fenway Park. I was at the game. I was watching it. I never thought for a second this ball was gone off the bat. I really never did. It looked like it was a kind of a looping fly ball. I was like, that's clanking off the monster. But I also said off the bat, he's never getting two on that. The problem was that he stared at the ball for about 3 seconds, walked out of the batter's box, got to first base, made a hard turn, and stayed there. And then Gary and Keith were talking about it. Hilariously, Juan Soto stole second base immediately the first pitch of the at-bat against Pete Alonso afterwards. He's on second base anyway. But then there's a quote after the game. And also, Brandon Nimmo grounded to double play because that's all the Mets did on Monday night was grounded double plays whenever they got guys on. No one got a big hit. I don't think there was a single hit with Risp in this game, actually. Maybe one exactly, but that was it. After the game, Carlos Mendoza goes, I thought Soto had a pretty good game. Like, that was a good shot. It's hard to get the ball over that green wall. These guys aren't used to that. I'm going to talk to him about getting out of the box because that was the time we should have gotten out of the box. Soto goes, I feel like I've been hustling, which is kind of funny because Sunday night, he definitely didn't hustle again. And then there were some ground balls in this game that he definitely hustled, but that
Yes.
play he definitely did not hustle, and it was apparent.
Yeah, I really would have wished that he would have said, like, hey, hand up, messed up there, should have been busting it out of the box. I think that was the really, really, really easy way to handle this, and it would have been a non-story. And I guess Mets PR didn't get their hands on that one. So shocking. They, were so tight about the Mets'd Up podcast, but it's not about us. I wish he would have answered that better. He didn't hustle. He knows he didn't hustle. Wish he would have answered it better, but also at the same time, I don't know, non-story, truthfully, at the end of the day, him saying that.
It is. It just sucks that 2 nights in a row when the Mets are desperately struggling for a lead and for base runners that
And I do think Carlos Mendoza is going to talk to him, and I do think it's going to be a really easy conversation.
Yeah.
And that's one of the major pluses to having Carlos Mendoza, as well as Carlos Mendoza being a Spanish-speaking manager. They can just straight up say what they need to, and it's going to be no problem whatsoever.
And it's funny, too, because when you look at these things, there are 3 quotes from Juan Soto that have been posted by SNY after the game. One has 29,000 impressions, one has 500,000 impressions, and one has 26,000 impressions.
Let me guess which one has 500,000.
Give me a guess.
The negative one.
You're right. Because then someone asked Juan Soto about the team being able to come through in the clutch. He says, we got to capitalize as a team. We got to go out there and get those guys in. We do a pretty good job at getting guys in, but at the end of the day, we have to come through more. Very fine quote, 26,000. Then you get another one. We're going to have our ups and downs. We just have to keep our chins up and keep moving forward. It's a game of failure. Sometimes you're going to fail. You have to keep moving forward. It doesn't matter what. Another fine quote about a baseball team that's, just been 500 over the last 2+ weeks of baseball. But for some reason, that one quote that goes against what his manager said is the whole thing. And I do not doubt that there probably are some slightly weird chemistry things this Mets clubhouse has to figure out. And part of that comes from some guy coming in there who is the highest paid athlete in the history of sports. And that he's the guy who's making, I don't know, almost twice as much per season than the guy who's like absolutely considered the leader of the team, like between with Francisco Lindor. I still think there probably has to be a moment of coalescence, but I don't really think it's as even remotely close to as serious as anybody else wants this to be right now in the baseball media.
I think the only thing I'll push on is that Soto does look unhappy, but I think it has nothing to do with him being a New York Met or the contract that he signed. I think it has to do, totally with his play. He is not playing up to his standards. That's why he's unhappy. Imagine if you were doing your job and you were doing it poorly and everyone's like, hey, not playing that well. You'd be like, yeah, fuck, this sucks. I hate this. I want to play well. Like the unhappy stuff and then automatically tying it to it's because of being with the Mets is so insane. And again, it feels like it's the sleeper cells, it's the idiots on Twitter, it's the Yankee fans. I feel like we haven't seen any real Mets people actually say this stuff yet, which is an encouraging sign for me.
Yes, and if anything does come out about this stuff from real Mets people, then we will be here. We haven't even heard a guy like Martino try to stir the pot with this yet. This is the bottom of the bottom right now between Klapisch and K using whatever teeny tiny little Mets source they have, whatever rat is in the building. So that's something that does have to be figured out sooner rather than later.
Because there is a rat.
There's a rat right now.
Jose Alvarado.
There's a rat, and there has to be someone that is in some way upset with Juan Soto. And again, some of that frustration could be the way he's handled himself around the media on Sunday, making someone's job harder because he was not handling the media well. 1, ignoring media, and 2, ignoring media again. So again, that's kind of where it's at right now. While also being someone who's probably been in the building a long time because that's someone that Klapisch should have a connection with. And then I don't know what's going to happen with this story. I really hope nothing happens with this story.
I would love
I don't
for
think anything should.
Yeah.
I think if he just hits a home run tomorrow, probably okay. If the Mets just win a game, they're facing Walker Buehler off the IL. I hope they crush him. But it seems like that there's a lot of these little teeny tiny things happening, and everything's just being exasperated by the fact that the Mets are just not playing as well now than they were in April. None of these stories existed. If the Mets won one more game against the Yankees this weekend, none of this would have been said. Yeah, that's kind of where it's at. That's how baseball works.
And again, like we both think that Juan Soto can play better. We've seen him play better. We know he can. But objectively speaking, the stuff like behind the scenes and under the hood, it's all pretty much the same as last year. He's just getting a little bit unlucky at times. He's got like his expected slug right now is 597. That's like 160 points lower than where it's at right now. His expecting batting average is about 63 points lower than what it currently is. The stuff is going to turn around. He's still hitting the ball exceptionally hard. He's still not chasing. He's still getting on base. He's still barreling up the baseball at elite rates. It's going to turn around. The rolling X-WOBA graph on Baseball Savant is super high. It's going up and up and up and up since the start of the season. I don't have fears of Juan Soto moving forward. I just hope that this nonsense with the media, I hope somebody can just shut this shit up, because it really is ridiculous.
There's also something else funny about the Mets, because the big story right now that's going on, this is probably how we'll end this, is the fact that it's a risk problem with the Mets right now. So they're not coming through runners in scoring position. It's happening time after time, game after game. People are like, how can this keep happening? This is disaster. Something has to change. Well, first thing, the players aren't going to change, so I'll know what's going to change. And also some people are like, well, the approach has to change. But as of right now, in terms of runners in scoring position, the Mets might have one of the best approaches in baseball, because their strikeout rate is the fourth lowest in the entire league at 18.4%. Their walk rate is the sixth highest in the league at 12%. And their batting average on balls in play is the second worst in the league at 239. That is kind of the whole thing right now. We're putting the ball in play. They're not finding gloves. And some of these balls aren't that well hit. I will concede that. I will 100% give you that. But it's mostly a situation right now where we're doing things that are okay, good, and not great. But the way that baseball always works is that water finds its level. And I will absolutely harp on that, go through that. Because again, also the last one right here, hard hit rate runners in scoring position. The Mets are 10th, ahead of the Chicago Cubs, who are considered one of the best offenses in baseball.
Yeah, one thing I will say that is Mendoza did mention how he feels like recently with runners in scoring position, the Mets have been a little bit too passive. He wants to see them be a little more aggressive, which I thought was a nice
tonight
quote.
with runners in scoring position, twice. One time Brandon Nimmo popped up, one time he hit into a double play in the first pitch of the at-bat.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't, again, there's no magic formula for this shit. It's baseball. We got 100 of these games left?
So many.
We can't live and die in every single one. It's just at this time last year, Jorge Lopez, I think, still hadn't thrown his glove into the stands yet.
A couple weeks ago, this time last year, Aaron Judge had an OPS at 743. Remember that? 725. I'm shocked the reporters weren't asking if Aaron Judge regretted signing his big contract with the Yankees at the time. Was the regret sinking in when he was struggling? I'm not sure. They didn't ask him.
I mean, we had the classic Washington Post article we shouted out for, 2 years straight, when the guy was like, Francisco Lindor is not the player he once was, or the player the Mets expect him to be. Oh, wait, maybe not. It's actually on a Hall of Fame track. This is just how it works this time of year when these small sample sizes. It's just people don't really know ball. That's why you guys come back to the Messed Up podcast.
And until Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, shout out Ken, foul territory, until any of the big names actually start talking about this stuff legitimately, quite literally, you shouldn't care. You shouldn't care. We just simply had to do this episode because we want to get some views in the top right now.
And we know that some of you guys are probably kind of nervous reading all these things. We want to just talk about it. We want to talk about it loud. That's why this Media Marvel segment exists. That's why we got this stuff right now. It's for us, for all of us. And all of you who are watching, I hope you got something out of it, because we had fun doing this. Making this timeline was a great time in my Boston Airbnb after celebrating my dad's birthday at Fenway Park.
Yeah, no, it was, I wish we didn't have to, but that's what we do over here at the Mets'd podcast. We'll talk about anything that has to do with the Mets. Make sure you guys are subscribed to our YouTube channel, Mets'd podcast. We appreciate all the new Yankee fans that subscribed after the last series.
Thank you guys for your comments.
That you guys are hate watching and commenting. That's awesome. Mets fans, you're welcome to do it as well. Drop a like on the video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to our audio podcast feed as well, Mets'd podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Download, subscribe, and leave us a review. You can follow James on social media at
James Schiano.
And I'm Draftnik Mark with a C. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We will catch you all after the Red Sox series. Let's fucking go Mets.
Let's go Mets, guys. See you next time.